All right, we're live. So yeah, yesterday I did a deep dive kind of going through how this kind of the end-to-end flow of the ingestion or kind of the whole submit process within overlay services. And I'm really trying to kind of move the different tools I've got out there to kind of be as inline as absolutely possible with kind of the standard stack, both as an example, a real world example of real world projects, and also just to get, well, kind of it's twofold and get in line with that. Just, yeah. And I went through a process with this overlay services back in summer, trying to do that at that point in time. And it was still in development. There's still a lot of active stuff going on. So I just decided that wasn't the time. But I really, really like almost everything that's in here. Sorry, I'm scrolling around. The only concern I've got is there is this flow of transaction goes through a topic manager to figure out if it belongs in that topic or not. And that topic manager says, it basically says which outputs are created in this or apply to this topic, and then also what inputs were spent within the concept within this topic. The problem I'm having, let me find out. Okay. So where is it? Okay. Nope. Wherever. Okay. So the first time we're actually running through the topic manager is calling this identify admissible outputs. Mm-hmm. I'm being very verbose just because this is a stream as well, but to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
And this returns an admittance instructions. And the admittance instructions are literally just an array of which outputs and which inputs we're saving or we're not. Mm-hmm. So I'm basically within my topic manager's implementation of this method, it is going to have to parse the transaction for whatever rules it's looking for to say, do I belong in this topic? Right?
Yeah.
Or which outputs belong in this topic?
Right.
So that's all well and good. That tells which outputs. It goes through. It basically saves those outputs as tokens in or whatever they're called, as items in the storage layer, saying, okay, this is an output that we are now tracking, or that has now been spent. So here is then where we're saving kind of the generic. This is what the TXO was. It belongs to this topic. Yeah. Here's its context.
Everything. Generic context, yeah.
Then we go through each of the lookup services, and we tell those, or we basically tell the lookup service, hey, here's an output. And obviously the lookup service can decide to do something with that output or decide to skip it based on whatever the context is within that.
Right.
Whatever that lookup service is trying to.
What it cares about, yeah.
But, okay, and this is just taking kind of identifiers and the locking script as well as what the topic is.
Yeah.
So if I guess a number of the use cases that I'm kind of trying to map out or fit into this, I end up needing to parse this transaction twice at a minimum. Mm-hmm. And so like these could be fairly sizable. Let's say they're Scrypt smart contracts, and I need to pull some data about the state or from the state of that contract. I need to parse that state out to determine if this figures as part of my topic or not. Mm-hmm. But then when I go to then save data about this output, I need to parse it again, and I don't have any context about the transaction or the rest of the parsing process.
Mm.
And so
Not
I'm
even how many
wondering.
satoshis it looks like, right? There's not
What's
even.
that?
It doesn't even look like I'm reading this function right now on line 298,
Yeah,
and so we're passing in only TXID output index,
the
and
locking
then
script
the
of the topic.
script and topic. So there's not even like the number of satoshis in the output.
Correct.
So that's a problem. It seems like.
Well, okay. Well, it sounds like we're probably on the same page here then.
Yeah.
Ideally, what I would like to be able to do, and this is kind of the only, it's kind of blowing me away how close this is to,
Mm.
I've said this before, the different indexers I've implemented, they're almost exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the one kind of different concept that I think I would like to see here is basically having not just, so let me go back up to where we get that admissible outputs. At the top. Okay. So we call this identify admissible outputs. I almost want this, either this to be able to return more of a context object, or there to be actually a context object even higher up that is kind of like that can get passed into both this topic manager concept, the interface, as well as the lookup service interface. Like some way of being able to, if a topic extracts information from an output when it is parsing it to see if it even applies, it should have some, I don't know, maybe it's a property of type unknown or something. Just it should have some way of basically being able to let external stuff know, hey, I extracted this data when I parsed this transaction, such that then the lookup service can actually look at that context and be able to make its own further determination of what do I need to save about this topic.
Mm. So there are. Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I would understand the desire to not parse things more than we need to. Uh, I think we can start by knocking out some easy stuff, so we don't have so much, so many points of discussion all at once. I think the thing that we can agree initially about for sure is it would definitely be nice to have the entire transaction passed into output added on the lookup
Yes.
service side, right? Like if you have the beef, like an atomic beef structure and the output index, well, then you can go and you have suddenly not only the not only do you have the locking script, but you have the inputs, you have the sequence numbers and lock time. If you're dealing with anything that might even be non-final, you have number of satoshis, which you're currently just missing entirely here, which is
Yeah.
important. You can check ordinality if you wanted to do that because you have the
Right.
outputs, like which outputs have how many satoshis, etc. Right. So yeah, I agree with that, and I would support that change. If you wanted to PR that and change the topic, or the lookup service interface to just take a beef. I mean, we have beef right here. We may as well pass it, right?
Yeah, but I think it is important, and when this is, yes, certainly we could pass the beef. And in that case, we wouldn't need to pass the locking script because we've
Right.
got the output index, so we can look
Exactly.
it up ourselves.
Yeah, beef and output index is all that's necessary, really, and then the topic.
Yeah, well, and that's where I kind of want to make sure, though, that the further application of this actually fits.
Yeah, the context stuff.
Yeah, I've already parsed it, and even let me actually give a kind of a complex example here. So there are a number of things that are being indexed in the OneSat space right now. So actually, let's use HodBlocker as an example. Regardless of whether it's used, whatever, it's a use case to talk through. There is social media data on one output that is getting parsed. or it's getting, so in this case, that would be one topic of here's this social media type of post thing. And so that one topic manager could identify just, I'm tracking these type of social media posts. And then another one is tracking whether outputs where people have locked up Bitcoin for some period of time in a separate output. So then again, that's its own kind of topic of like, I'm looking for this lockup script. Excuse me. But then there's another layer, which is kind of like the HODBlocker layer. They're a indexer or overlay or whatever that cares about the overlap of those two things. Saying, I care about things which have locks and are social media, not one or the other, but both of those. And those both live at different outputs.
Different outputs, okay. Yeah.
So it's a transaction context. And I guess my concern when looking kind of how I would map something like that through here is I might end up having essentially three topics: a lock topic, the social media topic, or social post topic, and locks and social posts. And we already have these topics in a hierarchical array, or an ordered array of, we do this topic manager, those come in. Sorry, hush up, guys. We do the topic managers in order. And so I'm like, how I have that implemented in my solutions, which is not necessarily the right way, but there is this context that is getting passed in to essentially every lookup service, and every topic manager and every lookup service, that essentially the previous ones that have been run have been able to kind of tag their own parsed information on, so that the next topic manager that runs through actually has that context of this indexing. So this overlay service has done things in a certain order, and a previous thing has run that has identified that output 0 is of this type. So when I'm working on output 1, I can see, okay, output 0 had this other topic tagged to it. And so now I know, without me having to reparse the first topic, it shouldn't be generic. Let's go with the locks. So output 0 is this lock output. Output 1 is the social media topic. If I have the context about this submission process for my third topic manager, which is HODBlocker posts, I don't have to reparse the previous outputs to say, do I have locks and do I have posts? I can literally say, I only accept transactions where the lock topic manager has put it in the lock topic and the post topic manager has put it in the post topic. And so this third topic manager is really able to just look at the context of this run through this transaction and kind of what is the status of the transaction as it has passed through. Is that fundamentally not fitting to how this works, or is that a concept that is fundamentally compatible with kind of your vision of how this thing works?
Well, what's tough about it is it's a transaction-oriented context.
Yes.
Right? Where we're transcending the output, and where the system is able to scale, like the concern is really scalability, right? Like, when each topic manager is independent and fundamentally output oriented, we're able to separate a lot of things. And that separation allows for, parallelism, different use cases, things like that. But when you have two outputs that kind of depend on each other, you can, it creates some difficulty. I mean, trying to rectify that. Yeah, I would say that a fundamentally transaction-oriented context is incompatible in terms of just because of the scalability concerns with not being able to have, effective synchronization and
Wait,
you know,
I don't think you're understanding me right. There's no asynchronous. This is all about still this this
sorry, I wasn't
overlay service
yeah,
processing of this one transaction. So
right.
we
I
still
guess
have.
I wasn't referring to asynchronous. I mean, synchronization in a sense of when two overlay services need to exchange information
Uh-huh.
between each other, right? There can't necessarily be like a prescribed order of which outputs need to be processed in which order, and output number one has things which then get passed into the context of output number two, because when the sync process runs between the two nodes, the node B may request output number two from node A, and then node A is just going to provide it, but without context around output number one.
It doesn't need the context. It's getting the transaction. So when they go to ingest that transaction on the other side, they're only going to be, so the synchronization is only going to be on the topic level where you're syncing. I mean, everything's tied to the topic, right? So if I've got an overlay service that is dealing with just the locks, it's going to get just the lock topic.
Yeah.
Now, if I have another one that's just subscribed and just syncing on the message posts, it will. But then I've got a third one that in order for my local overlay to have put it, or any overlay to have put it into that topic, and those overlays have to be running the other ones. But they don't have to. Okay. Okay. I needed to talk this through. So the idea is, it isn't just about parsing. So if I wanted to have an overlay, have an overlay that's just for those two things, I could maybe load in some modular indexer for each one. But if I'm having topic managers for those other ones, I'm going to be syncing and consuming everything else in that topic that's on the chain
that other nodes send you.
Yeah, well, right, that I'm subscribed to or whatever.
You have arrangements, and it goes back and forth, and then you get that stuff.
Well, okay, but that subscription process is different. I have to subscribe to sync on that, but the functionality of the topic manager doesn't mean, just the fact that I'm using a topic manager does not mean that I'm syncing on that topic. It just means I'm identifying if this output is part of that topic.
Yeah, that.
So I'm not sure that I understand the scaling issues here.
Well, I mean, it's related. Well, so if we have a defined order in which topic managers run, I think.
Wait, hold on. Just sorry to be precise. Within an instance of overlay services or across? Where are we standardizing this?
I think we'd have to standardize it across everybody who does this protocol, right? So we have two, one for each output, and then you have the third one that has to come afterwards.
Yes.
I think that might work a little better, because then they can depend on those previous ones to do it.
Well, but that's actually, I'm sorry, that's actually a prerequisite of like if you're going to run that topic manager, that becomes just a prerequisite that says it's not going to match anything if those other ones aren't before it, because and so it could still run, it just wouldn't have any outputs and it wouldn't be configured properly essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the desire to maintain. So I'm thinking kind of, you know, um, back in the chain of causality here, like why we're, you know, in this in this interesting position. It is an interesting thing to consider. But is the reason why we have two outputs that are not, like, we don't have the social media data combined with the locking data in one output? Is the reason there based on like ordinality or something like that?
No, it's because everything are kind of micro protocols, and they can be plugged together in various different ways. And so to say that I mean, you could certainly solve it by saying we're just going to pull everything together, but then you lose the interoperability aspects of things.
And by that, you mean that some protocols can be in some outputs.
Essentially, I'm looking at transactions and protocols as composable things. And I don't know why certain people might want to compose certain things together, or why there might be use cases that try to tie standard existing things together. But it's kind of what a transaction gives us. Is it's not about, okay, you have to stick everything on one output. It is a way of marrying together some
combining and splitting value, as the white paper would call it.
Yes, and also and there's a graph aspect to it of, I mean, these inputs came from this place,
right,
and then these new outputs came from this whole process.
Yeah, they're arising from this process.
So the transaction itself, I mean, I love this idea of, and I do it heavily, of using outputs as basically tokens.
Yeah.
But it's almost like at least within kind of this lookup server and stuff, we're missing the context of this is, and we don't need to go further than that. We don't need to go into this is this whole chain of context and here's the block level, but just simply the idea that says when a transaction is going through here, that's kind of the entire context that we're looking. And that is kind of one step in that state machine. And it's like, I don't know exactly what
it's transactional in the database sense of the word. It's atomic. It happens, and then the state is incremented forward by one.
Yes, that is exactly what I mean. So, yeah,
I can see that makes it makes sense. Currently, there's a separation between like transactions have outputs, and then outputs are kind of tagged in the submission process into particular topics. So, for example, when you submit a transaction to the system with the submit endpoint, it comes with an array of topic names, and we're tagging this with tagged beef. Right? So it's beef, but then also we're saying these are the topics that I want to run checks and see if there's any outputs. And those are kind of instructions given to the system about that. Some people care about some topics, and some people might care about other topics. And then when you sync with those people, you only tag the same. You're sending the same transaction, perhaps, but tagging different topics compared to who you're, or depending on who you're sending it to.
Yeah.
And perhaps maybe what we're thinking about here is I can give some other out-of-band instruction, or maybe there's a pre-programmed way of doing it where we say, here's some arbitrary context. when you get this transaction, you should know about this. And then also maybe here's a set of instructions that, so we're saying first you're going to run through this output through this topic, then you're going to run this other output and see if it matches
Well,
the
but see,
second.
you're being very prescriptive in that says the person I am syncing with, I am instructing them how to do it. And I guess where I'm looking is more of just literally this third topic is composed of the two previous ones. And so in a second, essentially, the other two are important for this one to work, but this one doesn't matter at all for the other two, the previous two to work. They're completely independent. And so you can be building up essentially a it's probably a bad analogy. Yeah, forget the analogy.
I understand what you're saying. It's composable.
Yeah. And I don't really think it's all that complicated to add support for it. I just wanted to kind of, I mean, first of all, this helps that you're in the same on this lookup service, that it's missing context and you're on the same page there. So that will help. So I think what I'd like to do here is actually just put together a pull request that is just a work in progress. Here's how I might try to solve this. And then I don't know if you're open to kind of like seeing if that's works within your view of this whole thing, or
Yeah, I mean, I tried to be as what I tried to do when we built this was define the widest possible set of, like, tried to stay out of the way as much as possible. And
yeah, I'm 100% on board with that.
I suppose this would not be required in the sense that, if it was backwards compatible and people didn't have to provide this context and then consume it, depending on what topic they're using, then this could be almost like a topic specific extensible thing. Maybe we could decide, every topic that starts with, maybe every topic name, TM underscore whatever, that ends with, plus context or some postfix or something. We have a BRC that says, okay, in this context, or with these topic managers that end with this identifier, then we're going to require different rules on, or just implement this additional information.
Yeah,
and move it around, between the lookup services and the topic managers, so that the lookup services get, because you are so, I believe, saying when the topic manager admits something, it has parsed out some data, and it may want to let interested lookup services know about this additional data, so that at every level of the system, context can be
essentially. I mean, we don't need to go so far that asynchronous external context needs to be just data context, but yes. I mean, I'm not, and maybe, I guess this is TypeScript. You certainly could pass around objects that call other services and whatever else in that context, but actually,
well,
it's generic context. I think that's the way to really look at it.
Yeah, it is. Because then people can do it, they can use it as a building block, because then we're not being because I do have a knack for trying to be too, we shouldn't be as prescriptive with things. So opening that up could be good. What I like about the current lookup service architecture, and one thing I'd like to preserve, is a little, secret that we thought of when we built it, is actually the lookup service interface. If you pull that up, where it's like on output added, on output sent.
Me find what I'm looking for. Lookup service.
Yeah, so these currently, you pass in an object to the engine for a lookup service, right? And you kind of have it running on the same box.
Yeah.
But this could be like an API. Like, what I mean is it's remote. Like, you could have the on output added thing call out
totally
HTTP.
Yeah.
And then basically your CPU utilization on your you have a core like overlay services box that runs all your transactions, but it doesn't have to manage all the all the lookup services because you know it's all these things are networkable in the sense you can just you can call
Yeah.
it out to, for example, the lookup method and pass these things and then get something back over a network or something. So I just want to
Right.
avoid passing functions.
No,
Right.
actually, I love this on the lookup side of things. It's just very much. So this is basically the key. You're passing in the key of the service, which I assume is just a canonical key that this key equals this service,
LS underscore, yeah, whatever you want to call it.
and then you give it whatever it's expecting. And at the interface level, we don't have to know what that is. We're just giving it this data. I love that. So yeah, no, I don't think again, everything else, the only thing I'm feeling missing here is just that context. Everything else I love. I think it's really quite well thought out. I just don't want to repeat work.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So when a topic manager admits an output,
Yeah.
it has the option of returning, the admittance instructions. An optional thing that it may or may not return would be context.
Well, I almost feel like the context can be passed into it, and the context is the next layer up. Like,
well, whatever it is, yeah, it could be passed into, identify admissible outputs in the topic manager.
yeah.
And then it could do any transformations that it wants, and optionally, in addition to returning, what outputs to admit, it might also either keep the context the same and just return exactly what it got, or it might do some transformation or some parsing or whatever. So that
Right.
way, when somebody submits a transaction, they can provide context.
I guess so. I wasn't thinking I mean,
And then when that context
then
is
you're
returned by
not
the topic
really
manager,
deterministic, though.
it won't be well, what's deterministic about the system is whether the scripts evaluate whether the outputs are actually spendable, and kind of the miners are the transaction processing network is the arbiter
Well,
of
when
determinism in that sense.
not when it comes to this type of kind of, what do I want to say, identifying. So when we go to that identify admissible outputs, we don't rely on someone else externally giving us hints that says these are the ones you might want to look at. It's going to be parsing the transaction itself. And every time you pass that transaction through this, we're promised outalling this, though. No, we're not.
Maybe we are.
Hold on. Where is the topics.map? We are. Okay. Now the scaling.
They won't chain each other. That's the one thing that we probably can't, because if you think about running this at scale, somebody's topic manager could be a networked service.
No, I mean, I certainly understand how you can get into you can get into issues where that would cause, how we say, more pipelining in how you process a transaction and less concurrency.
Yeah, and then
but that, see, I'd hate to get to a point where we have to like specify a mode or something that says, am I running this in parallel or am I running this in series? But I can also see some value in doing that, and that then muddies up the whole. I'm really trying to avoid having to reconfigure.
It's messy because it's difficult to, uh, it's. I mean, ultimately, all of these things will be based on what people, what protocols get designed and adopted at scale, and we should try to have protocols that, when people use them, will scale well. I understand the desire to have, interoperability and composability within the design of protocols, and perhaps multi-output uh, structures like that. But the tricky thing with it is just going to be, we run into these, concurrent type things, and if we can design specific, you know uh, ways of creating transactions where uh, a single output is the way that a particular meaning is conveyed, and then maybe other outputs are for change, or you can have multiple, but each one kind of is self-containing in the sense that it conveys uh, some sense of the value, or of a particular singular thing, right? Like a token. As
Yeah, see, my
then-
concern about that though is then you're basically saying the standard tooling only works if you fit this one standard use case.
Well,
and
output
not-
tokens is really the is the standard, right? But the interoperability, the interoperability is, or composability rather, is when you can view the tokens through different lenses depending on who you are and what you care about, right?
Yeah, I agree completely.
So therefore, you could have perhaps like a one topic manager that applies certain rules and whatever, or maybe even different moderation schemes or whatever, and then does that set of rules, and then another one has a different set, and they kind of view the token through a different lens. But when the output is the token, then things become a lot more scalable.
Well, again, I mean, scalable is
We can parallelize
having things such that we can process many transactions in parallel, and they are basically stateless for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, we need to know that the inputs were valid and are unspent,
yeah.
but essentially each spend is stateless. So I agree on that aspect. The only real, I don't think. I mean, I'm visualizing a future where there are many tiny micro protocols, and I mean there already are in a lot of the stuff we're doing, and those things can be used in conglomeration with each other as you see fit to do what it is that you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a case where I'm standing up an overlay service that only cares about this HODLocker concept of social posts and locks, yes, I could pull in a lock parser and a social media parser and make my topic manager have both of those things built in.
Yeah.
I certainly see that level, but at the same time, if I'm looking to build infrastructure that is serving many different purposes for many different needs, then if I'm running a lock indexer or a social indexer and this other thing, then I've just greatly increased the amount of effectiveness of scalability, because every time I process one of these transactions, I have to do the same work twice, or maybe 3 times, or maybe 4 times, depending on what lens we're trying to look at those transactions through.
Mm-hmm. Well, supposing you had a world where there were nested overlays and you have these low-level protocols, say the locking one and the social one, and those were their own networks, right? There's no scalability issues because at each of those layers, the validation can happen in parallel, right? Then what could happen is at the higher level, you could run a lookup on the lower level network to confirm whether that network has actually accepted, but only after you try to send the transaction through at that higher level. So it's tricky. But I mean, a much simpler approach would be to when you're designing the higher level protocol, it's like make a protocol design decision that.
But this isn't one protocol, like, and this isn't necessarily something I'm designing,
Right.
or anyone else. The whole point is we're not saying how you use Bitcoin. We're saying, I mean, we're giving the tools to say, certainly here's how you do SPV, here's how you scale Bitcoin, here's how you get these overlay networks. But what you do with inside those, I don't think can be prescriptive to say it's only available if you do it this way. Otherwise, you're on yourself and you got to go rebuild the whole stack from scratch. Like,
well, I mean, certainly there's going to be different ways to run it, and I think we can agree to the level of, okay, we have this context which is plumbed through from ingest through the topical admittance process through the topic manager, and then out from there even into the lookup service to avoid additional compute overhead if desired in lookup services, so that lookup services can reuse whatever's been parsed by the topic manager.
Yeah, right.
So plumbing that context through on a per output basis, as well as providing the additional kind of the beef on the on output added call for lookup, so that we get satoshis, and we can look at ordinality, we can look at anything else. Like, I think I can get on board with those two changes for sure. The issue, and where I think we'll have scalability issues as well, is just going to be making changes around the series versus parallel, and then the chaining and building up of that context from one output across to other outputs, and then persisting that across, and kind of muddying the waters with regard to the separation of different topic managers and when they build on top of each other, and a prescribed order in which they, not a prescribed order, but a required order when they build on top of each other to get that context in, and then to validate based on it. And then you go, start an output 0, add things, go to output 1, add other things, and then check some rules and whatnot. Like, that stuff that's where it gets challenging, right? There's a lot of things that make that part of it.
It's not that challenging in that, how do I say this? You are building, like, if you're running an overlay service, you are installing the topic managers that you want to run. You are configuring your overlay service for your specific use case. And certainly I can see it's almost like this could probably be solved by simply, how do I say this? Within the configuration of the topic manager you're using, configuring a concurrency value, such that if you need to process them in series, you simply have a concurrency of 1 for that transaction. And so basically that just means abstracting the promise.alls to go through a little bit of a task queue processing thing that just is like, all right, give me the next one, give me the next one, give me the next one, based on but again, that might be just like over engineering when really all we need is this series or is this parallel.
Yeah, I mean, so those series based use cases, I just it's
Well, actually, when I think about what this will look like when this gets ported to Go, which I'm pretty sure is on the roadmap, there is probably not going to be the equivalent of a promise.all that says run all of these things at once and come back when they're all done. Like most of the servers that I'm working on, every individual process does have its own concurrency limitation. So it doesn't, if it's got, I don't know, 1,000 or 10,000 different outputs to be processed, it doesn't just say, I'm just going to open up a thread for every one of these things and just do them all. And I mean, there is concurrency limitation to
Imagine if these were networked, right? Like you
that,
had.
I don't necessarily want my server to open up 10,000 HTTP connections at the same time. I want it to do 8 at a time in order.
Well, that's a. I mean, yeah, I understand that there's going to be limitations, and but using, I mean, yeah, like maybe defining which topic managers your topic manager depends on, and then when it consumes from those, it gets their context as part of
That's an
its input
interesting
context.
idea.
So you have like input context and output context for each topic manager, right? So when in the identify admissible outputs function, you have input context, which is, what this takes in, and then it returns output context after the identification. And then you can kind of have whatever inputs you want and whatever outputs are created by any given topic manager, so that you say, well, I'm defining this one and I need these two. And then the context flows through and can be transformed at each layer.
Well, I don't know that, I don't know that, just to clarify your language there, I don't know that one topic manager or one process should be able to transform the previous one. It can transform the whole state by adding its own stuff.
Yeah, it can add or remove. It can edit. It could pass it through. It's not like going to affect the previous one in any way.
Right. Okay. That's really, yes.
Like after that layer's done, then that one's done, and then we're going to move on and do the next one.
Yeah.
Right. So I either want to consume directly from the wire, in the case I have no dependencies, and then when you call submit and you provide context, you just get that directly at that level. So does everybody else who wants that. And then if I want to consume from UHRP, for example, or I want to consume from any of them, for example, like for example this Huddlocker one, or any one of them, that one could have some output context that is defined by the rules of that topic manager. So when you look at that topic manager, you know what its context will be produced, how that context will look.
Right. So that could actually be essentially in the metadata of the topic manager.
You can define it as part of defining a topic manager.
These are other topics I am dependent on.
Yeah, this is what I require, and this is what my context that I will output. And you have composable.
What if that were how exactly that configuration works is interesting.
You mean from an implementation perspective?
Yes.
Oh, just Control A and copy the code and put it into ChatGPT o1 Pro.
No.
And then ask it to.
That is not how I work.
I'm joking, of course. But
I know, but I've been on some calls with some guys. One of them who as I might slightly disparage him here, I will not name, but he's learning very, very good lessons of how not to trust it. Mm-hmm. But like the first reaction when you go to figure something is let me ask the chat rather than let me figure out what's going on here. We joke all the time, so I don't think he'll be upset about this, but yeah, it's like you can't offload your brain to it. But
right. So yeah, in terms of implementation, I think it would be a matter of building a dependency graph. Like, so
Well,
you
that's
have
why
like a few.
I'm almost wondering if topic managers shouldn't be able to actually just literally have instances of other topic managers as like defined within them, or should it be more of an external configuration thing
I
that
think it should probably be external configuration for the reason that if somebody upgrades to a, say, I'm using, I don't know, one version of a topic manager, but then they come up with an optimization so they don't have to, they have an efficiency thing. It's like, and then it also means that if you want to have 5 people who depend on the same one, you only have to run that one code once, and then you have the downstream output that goes to each of the 5 dependent ones, but that upstream only has to run once.
yeah. So you know
So
what's really cool about this, and this actually ties together a bunch of things I played with back in the run days and other stuff.
yeah, so we have first order topic managers, which are the current ones essentially, with context support. And then we have second order, third order, fourth order, whatever. And we just kind of, the implementation would be to build the graph of, at first order, we say, all right, we're going to run all the ones that have no, that depend on nothing, right? And we add those to the list of availables.
Yeah.
And then we go and for second order, for the round of second order, we say, all right, now based on our availables, which ones can we run now? And then we do that again, and we keep doing that until we have run through every one of them. So we add to our list of availables, and then we see who we can run next until we've gone through the whole set.
I like that. The question still then just comes really, how do you configure that? And that I will play with that idea. So
I think you just have an array of topic manager names that you specify as an optional property on your topic manager. So it would be like depends on.
yes. Yeah, I love it.
Strings.
Love it. Would you think that should be in kind of the generic metadata, or should that be a more explicit field created?
I think it probably should just be its own field that's optional.
Yeah. Okay. I like that.
If you don't have it, then we'll assume it's empty.
Right. So step back question.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go. Oh, actually, I might be going on some bad assumptions. Let me see if I'm right. There's no, is there? Yeah, right here. We have managers topic. So this, let's go up to this.managers.
It's a hash map.
Right. Is there any implied standard for the identifier of those?
I believe it's BRC 87. But yeah, it's TM underscore. Let me check to confirm that. Oops. Yeah, so BRC 87 is standardized naming conventions 4.
Okay, so essentially it's basically if you pick one that other people are always used, there's not any concept of like, okay, here is where a spec file existed on chain and we're using that out point as a definition, or
no, it's really at this level. It's people are going to do what they're going to do, and then maybe in a year or whatever, we can, when we stop getting along about who gets to use TM underscore cool thing, right? Then we can have a registry. But right now, it's just kind of we assume that somebody would be kind enough to not step on any toes while the network is small, and then we'll build a registry later. Or the BA will run it or something.
Yeah, well, or it's you write the JavaScript implementation on chain and use that out point as the identifier.
Yeah, that's
so when you're doing ship and slap, are these actual strings? These are what you are either subscribing to or announcing that you are providing on. Is that correct?
So ship and slap, Yeah, essentially, what was your?
Basically, we're using these identifiers. The topic manager identifiers is what we are announcing that we are subscribing to or announcing that we are providing data from.
Yeah.
Okay.
So ship, you're saying I host this topic manager, and you can talk to me at this URL. Here's the topic manager identifier, TM underscore or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Slap is the same. It's just for lookup services.
Yeah. Right. Oh. Okay.
It's the same exact protocol. It's just for lookup services. It's saying you can look things up from me at this URL.
Right. Okay.
So you want to advertise your topics that you're hosting for the purposes that when people have new transactions for those topics, then they're going to go find you and send you those transactions.
And I actually had understood that. I just hadn't realized. I was thinking that both sides was about the topic, either saying I have the topic or I have the topic I can share, or I want you to share anything on that topic with me, but it's not. It's about that next layer of abstraction of, okay, the topic said it. Got it. I got it. So if I've got the whole end-to-end, was it GASP GASP? Is that what it is?
Graph Aware Sync, yeah.
So does that okay, that's still just telling me, okay, now so if I'm saying because you're either saying you can look this up from me. How if I've got a peer or I've got many peers that have registered topics in we'll get to which one in a second because it might help me clarify the question. There is a topic. That topic is these HODLocker posts that we talked earlier. There's a HODLocker topic out there. I want to, so if I make then I guess, what do I do to tell that host, the people who are listening on that, people who are running those things that, oh, I don't. Sorry. I'm not actually getting words out. I'm thinking it through as I go. Okay. I stand up a new node on the network. I want to join the HODLocker network.
Mm-hmm.
What do I need to do to get other transactions in that network synced to me?
Mm-hmm.
And what do I need to do to provide to other people that I have those transactions, to advertise that I have those transactions?
So the first step when you want to join the network is you'll need to get synced up before you make yourself known. To do that, you can use, in this case, it would be SHIP, the Service Host Interconnect Protocol, and you would look up which other nodes are on the HODLocker network. Then, once you have the list of other nodes that are on the network, and this happens automatically, this is the GASP process. It's like the sync process. So you're basically reaching out to them and saying, hey, what UTXOs do you have?
Yeah.
And then they give you a list of of unspent outputs, and then you say, okay, great, I'd like to know the history, or that's enough, whatever, until you can anchor it and be satisfied with history and all that stuff.
Yep.
Then, you're up to speed, and then maybe you go out to another second node after you've done that to one node, because maybe you started only syncing with one node. So you have like most things, because that one node had most things. And you go to the second node and you say, hey, here's everything I already have. What am I missing? And they say, oh, you missed those 3 transactions, right? So then you get a little bit more filled in, and you keep doing that until you're satisfied. Now you're all synced up. Mm-hmm. What you do is, that's the GASP process.
Okay, so just to reiterate that whole process. When I first stand up online, I go to someone, to a peer who is indexing the SHIP. I speak to a SHIP overlay.
Yes.
It is indexing who has published that they have those available.
Yes.
And so from there, I get those URLs or whatever they are.
SHIP root resolver. There's a list of hard-coded SHIP root resolvers in the TypeScript SDK.
Okay.
They tell you who to talk to.
Okay. And so then I talk to them. I'm now
Yeah.
fully synced.
Yep.
Then I can, if I want, create a ship transaction that basically says, I can provide these now. And here's
Correct.
how much I'm going to charge or whatever other metadata
And
is
you
in
can
there.
pay for syncing. You could probably, it's probably polite, I don't know, to offer to pay somebody if they're going to give you a whole overlay network worth of
Right.
stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe
Totally.
they'll even require it by having a price.
Yeah. And actually, okay. I've got more questions on the details of that, but I'm trying to not get into the weeds.
Sure.
So, okay. So then the lookup services is actually a whole other dimension to this that isn't about me syncing on that topic.
You don't sync lookup services. You only
Right. No,
sync.
no, no. Right.
Yeah.
No, that is I don't use other people's lookup service to do the syncing of the topic. It's a completely different thing of that's basically advertising. You can look up this kind of data with me. So when you do a slap, a slap, you're basically saying these are lookups that I host.
You have advertised a slap token out, and now everybody knows that they can ask you about lookups on that.
Awesome. Okay. I feel like we've talked about those topics about 5 times, and this is the first time that totally makes sense. So I think I just needed to look through the code more first. Okay. I feel good about this. I'm going to put some ideas together without any assumption that the styling is going to be your preference, and I'll create a pull request, and we can figure out if it fits what you're thinking or compatible with what you got or not.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, I really like the idea, if we need to have those second order things, then there's that where you say, here's the ones I depend on. We can have the algorithm for that. We described it in this stream here, so
it's recorded.
Yeah, that's a good thing. And that'll be good. The context flowing through from the submit endpoint all the way to through each identified admissible outputs call, and then out from there, potentially fed into second order and third order and whatever ones. They can keep it the same. They can pass it through. They can get rid of it. They don't have to use it. It's all optional. But then whatever, at each time a lookup service is notified of a particular topic, something that got admitted and output was added to a particular topic. And for that given topic, whatever output came out of that particular topic's, topic manager, that lookup service is made available of that. It's made aware of it. And then also the lookup service is made aware of the beef instead of just the locking script. So that way you can check more things about the transaction. You can index more. You can keep track of that stuff. So lookup services can consume beef. They can consume context. And, that way people can build these types of use cases.
Yeah.
People that, people have freedom to use none of this or all of it or any combination. And it's completely compatible and aligned with the existing approach.
Yeah.
So there's no issues.
Awesome. I will get on that. Thank you very much for your time. And we've gotten some props that this was good in the chat. So
cool.
Maybe we'll do
David,
on another topic.
I've enjoyed it. We'll have to do more like it. So
sounds good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ty.